We get our weekly groceries delivered through Instacart because once football season starts, game time is family time. I can get everything my family needs for the week, from reliable staples to specialty ingredients, all delivered right to my door in as fast as 1 hour. So I can stay on my game without missing a minute of the game. Visit instacart.com or download the app to get free delivery on your first 3 orders. Offer valid for a limited time. Minimum order $10. Additional terms apply. Instacart. Add life to cart.
Percolate on a particular mix of odd and inspiring news headlines in Wendy's Coffee House. Newsmakers with a penchant for the unknown, unexplained, and unusual share their experiences with UFOs, ghost encounters, near-death experiences, and more for your own unique blend of Wendy's Coffee House Curious. And now, here's Wendy.
I don't know about you, but it has been absolutely off the charts in terms of energy. I think it's because it's October, things are winding down, things are amping up. Whatever it is, tons of energy. So I've been trying to figure out how to live without sleeping. So I'm already awake. But I think that's part of it. People are talking about this, feeling a little bit more, in some way, shape, or form, amped. And I concur. So dealing with that, though, it means there are a lot of other things you might be tuning into, tapping into, aware of that usually you're not conscious of. Some of those are sounds. Like we were coming in and my husband said, "Did you hear the sound? It was like an electronic from the bushes and there are no birds." And it was one of those, no, I didn't, but it was for him. So these kinds of things are little, I think, benchmarks and little checkpoints, little prompts to get you to expand your awareness and pay attention. My guests, we're going to get into that in just a minute with Driving into Infinity. My guest, Paula Lenz, has written about her experience living with her brother's spirit. This is a fantastic story. So we'll get into that in just a minute. But the other stuff I peruse in terms of expanding your awareness, the UFO Trail is one of the blogs I follow. And he does a lot of Freedom of Information Act. He kind of tries to figure out what he can get in terms of real, hard copy information about some of the things that are going on. One of the things he's curious about, Skinwalker Ranch. A couple of the guys who have been employed through Skinwalker Ranch have come forward and are now saying, because of their experiences, they're connecting the dots and saying, rather than it being about what was going on at Skinwalker Ranch, which it was also about, they suspect, monitoring their health, monitoring their responses, putting them through extreme and unpredictable and sometimes very uncomfortable encounters and seeing what their response would be. For what reason, that's still not quite clear. But Ingo Swann mentioned that in the book Penetration, mentioned that after he had been through a certain encounter, then they asked him, just for safety reasons, to check out with their doctor. And he had fallen down at one point and hurt his leg. And he said, "Look, it'll heal. It's fine. I'm due with a submarine research remote viewing thing tomorrow. It can't go. Sorry." Oh, so the fact that was still there in the same kind of encounter, the same kind of, let's go have you checked out with our medical thing. Were they going to wipe his mind? I don't know. Can they? Anyway, so that's one of those things that's going on right now, that following up with some of this information about the Skinwalker Ranch that's coming to light from guys who actually worked on site. The other thing, Nick Redfern, I've interviewed him before 2 or 3 times. He's got 50 books by now and continuing. He's prolific, but he gets into all the Fortean content, and he said that what he's noticed is, and this is a new story that he's just a little short story on mysteriousuniverse.org. He's saying that the hazards of writing about this stuff is that you experience it. And a lot of that is what people, once they are opening a door, a window, an area that they're not familiar with and begin to get really immersed in it, then these things can happen. And it's not a guarantee. It's just that it can happen. So if you're getting into this stuff like this in the Halloween season, getting into ghosts, visiting places where, doing the cemetery walk, going into a place where it has been known to be haunted and people can say that they have had experiences there. They're not joking. They're saying, look, It's my reality. It doesn't have to be yours. But be aware as you put yourself out there that these things are interactive and you can engage this on your own terms. You can also put the boundaries up and say, no, thank you. And then along that happy, I just decided that since this isn't ESP or anything, this is called the Farmer's Almanac, okay, which is sometimes better for 2020. I had to look and see what we're looking at. And I like the way they just kind of condense it into something nice. All across the upper Midwest, a parade of snowstorms. We get to Colorado and I think western Kansas, more wet than white. And then we get to the Midwest, which we consider in Kansas City, we're Midwest, snowy, icky, icy. Well, that's lovely. And then right below us, Oklahoma, Texas, pleasant. You go a little further south, nice in Florida. So there you go, the overview. Wherever you are, you can look it up in the Farmer's Almanac for 2020. My guest is Paula Lenz. And her story, she kept quiet about this because she wasn't real sure how it would be received. And some of that stuff, if you're in a circle that isn't open to these experiences and you have a business profile that you would like to stay, pretty in some way, shape, or form considered to be credible, then you don't always talk about your other experiences. And this is an amazing experience, driving into infinity, living with my brother's spirit. Paula Lenz, she lost her brother. And this is actually the time of year. So I'll let you intro your story with that because this is the anniversary over a couple of decades at least. Hi, Paula, and thank you for sharing your story. I think it's phenomenal.
Hi, thank you so much, Wendy. Really happy to be on your show.
You have a lot of the background that you get into. This was unexpected. You had a close-knit family. You were close with your brother, and it was completely, you say you had a little bit of a premonition prompt that something was going to happen, and as did your sister. But this was no easy ride.
Yes, true. And I had a dream, a recurring dream for a year before his accident, but essentially in October 7th, Friday, was the date of his fatal accident, and of course my family was just destroyed. I mean, my brother was 26, I was 30 at the time, and I went to my hometown to help my parents the following week. And during that time, 3 days after his funeral, I decided to take some funeral flowers out to my grandparents' house, and I ended up driving his personal truck because he was killed in a company truck. And I was by myself driving along on the road to my grandparents, and all of a sudden, I developed 360-degree vision as I'm driving. And I'm trying to figure out what is happening to me, what is going on. And then I realized that my brother was at my right shoulder, and he looked like a pattern of lights. And although he still had his features, too, I mean, I completely recognized him. But he said to me, I don't want you to be sad. I want you to be happy. And most of all, he said he wanted me to know what life was like for him now. And he explained to me that he was on another plane of being. And for him, it had just simply been time for him to go. And as soon as he finished telepathically conveying that information to me, then I was no longer in my body. But my brother was still with me the whole time through this experience. And I became a state of consciousness with him and found myself viewing some scene that looked like I was looking at something like a negative of a photo, but that didn't last very long. And then it seemed to me as though I was out in the middle of the universe. And after that, my focus became totally about infinity and eternity. And throughout this whole experience, my brother stayed with me. But the first thing that happened was I experienced this wave of peace over me. And it was the most beautiful peace I had ever experienced.
Okay, hold on, Paula. Just a minute. We got to take a break. I want to come back because this is what's called a shared death experience, and this is absolutely phenomenal. We're going to come back. The book is Driving into Infinity with My Brother's Spirit. Basically, I'm condensing it. And the website, Paula Lenz, Wix site. Back with more of this story. KCMO Talk Radio. Wendy's Coffee House, KCMO Talk Radio. Thanks for tuning in. My guest, Paula Lenz, has an experience that, 20 or 30 years ago, they didn't even have a name for this kind of experience. So the book, Driving into Infinity, Living with My Brother's Spirit, available at Amazon. It was a near-death experience, and still 20 years ago, I think, PMH Atwater and Kenneth Ring and Raymond Moody, they were all just getting into this late 70s, early 80s, I believe, is when that was all kind of, converging. They were really starting to figure out things were happening with the near-death experience. But with you, this that you were experiencing with your brother is a shared death experience. And that's a completely different, sometimes it happens when people are in the room. And then you also have, we'll get into this, after-death communication. But right now, you were looking into infinity, and you had basically almost transitioned into that ether state. And so what was it like?
Yes, so, the next phase that I experienced after experiencing this wave of peace was I experienced all knowledge. It was as though I knew everything that had ever happened in the entire universe for all time, and which is hard to describe, but I knew everything. And then the last wave that came over me was this huge energy of love, which I call spirit in my book. But this energy of love I knew was creation and manifestation. And at that point, when I began experiencing that energy of love, then I became one with that energy of love. And essentially, I was one with everything in the universe. And I knew at that point that everyone and everything that's ever existed and that will exist, that we are all one with this energy of love or spirit. Mm-hmm. And whether you believe in it or not, it doesn't matter. It's the truth of our existence and of everything in the universe. And we all have access to that consciousness, to that state of love, that energy.
Okay, the downside of that, though, is that you had to come back, because usually this is the point where people say, I was so thrilled to be there. I'm like, yeah, I'm home, everything's done. And then your brother said, not you.
That's exactly right. I realized that I was home, and I wanted to go on to the next stage, but And I kind of began whooshing away trying to do that, but my brother's energy, he pushed me back down into my body, and he said, no, you can't go yet. It's not your time. And so essentially I landed back in my body, which I was still driving the truck, and I'd made a turn onto the road that led to my grandparents. But I don't have any memory of driving that truck during that time. But once I got back to this life, I realized that my consciousness and my view of life was totally changed forever. And returning home to Houston after being in my hometown, returning to life as I knew it, working, that sort of thing. Everything just changed for me, and I was compelled to read everything I could get my hands on, and I've done this for years, about spirituality and so forth, and similar examples, I guess I'll say. But what happened after that was my brother continued to reach out to me for the rest of my life in various ways. And I also had after effects, which were similar to someone who had had a near-death experience.
Yeah, that's the thing about this that makes it so compelling and so extraordinary, because you have a lot of what the experiencers of a near-death encounter have as a residual, like elevated extrasensory awareness and the contact that reading your book, talking about, some things in advance, and if you're going to have a good connection with somebody else. And those are like the hallmarks.
Yes. And, for example, when my consciousness, when I returned here to this life, I viewed religion as religion versus spirituality. And I was raised Baptist, but I just couldn't go back to that. And so I searched, for a church that was, more centered around spirituality. That was a big thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
And, viewing humanity differently in terms of the things that occur here on Earth and our place in the universe. But some of the after effects that I had were, I'd be driving down the freeway, and as I'm driving, in the evening, the street lights would go out as I drove past. Now, eventually they would come back on. I could see behind me. Or even if I were walking in the evening down my street, the same thing would happen. The street lights would go off. And then sometimes, especially in the beginning, I could hear people's thoughts as they walked into the room.
No, that's disconcerting. I was like,
whoops. Yeah, and eventually that sort of faded away, but I have found as time has gone on that actually has returned to the point I know what people, a lot of times I'll hear the sentence in my head before they're getting ready to say it.
Yeah.
And so that to some degree has come back. But you're right, you mentioned the development of intuition or you can, call psychic events, seeing things that are coming up. And those areas have developed further the older that I've gotten. And, plus being more attuned through all these years to hearing and knowing, I'm guided by hearing messages, I think, from my guides.
Mm-hmm.
And, I had one incident where I was specifically told when I was wanting to change careers, I was specifically told in my mind, I could hear, send your resume to, and they gave me the name of this man who I had worked previously at another company with. And I kind of fought that. I was like, now why would I want to send it to him? And I just blew that off. But I kept hearing those same words. And eventually I thought, okay, I'm just going to go ahead and do this. And ultimately it resulted in my getting the best job of my career. And so, I do have a lot of intuition and information that comes through like that. And I've learned to read people's auras. So there's just a lot of after effects like that have continued to grow and expand through the years.
Okay, hang on a second. We're going to get back into it. We're going to talk about how Don, your brother Donnie, how he appears. It has to do with moving a chair. We're taking a short break here. My guest, Paula Lenz. And Paula had a legit, business career. And so she kept quiet about this for years. And so now that we're hearing the story for the first time, you have to understand this isn't something that she's been practicing telling. It's something that's like, well, I guess it's time, and we're glad. So the book, Driving to Infinity, Living with My Brother's Spirit, Paula Lenz, I should say Driving into Infinity, because that's the experience she describes with that shared death experience. It's just amazing. And then the after effects, just like somebody who's had a near-death encounter or a spiritually transcendent event, which is also part of that STE, all those initials. Can we buy a vowel? Maybe not yet. Coming up, we'll find out about the moving chair. Wendy's Coffee House, KCMO Talk Radio. Wendy's Coffee House, KCMO Talk Radio. My guest is Paula Lenz. And the experience she wrote about, that you'll read about in Driving into Infinity, Living with My Brother's Spirit, is something that, I mean, we're hearing more about these kinds of experiences now than we used to 20, 30, 40 years ago, all right? This now, it's like, it's okay to talk about it, and people are more comfortable with being around people who've had these experiences before. It was like, you could clear a room. Something weird happened. Okay, we don't want, it's catching. And so that's, I know it sounds odd to say that now, but I remember when I could only talk about these kinds of subjects with certain people. And now reading the books and other people having experiences and studying it, it's wonderful to know that these things are part of our global awareness and experience, and people are more comfortable talking about what happens when you die. So, Paula, you began to get, after a while, you were getting little clues, and one of them involved a chair.
Yes, that's exactly right. As you say, many different things began to happen after my brother's death, and one of those involved at my house in Sugar Land, Texas. I would come home from work, and in the dining room area, which my husband and I hardly ever use the dining room, but I noticed that there was a chair pulled out. And each week, that same chair, seemed to be moved, pulled out from the table a couple of times a week. I asked my husband, I said, are you going in there and using the dining room table for something? He said, no. He said, I don't know what you're talking about. And what happened was, when my brother, 2 summers before he died, he had stayed with us one summer there while he was working in Houston. And my husband and he would get in there in the dining room playing this crazy electric football game. It'd be real rowdy. They'd have scotch and sodas. I mean, it was just a crazy, funny time.
Rowdy. Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times they would stay up till 11 o'clock or something. I'd get up and all grouchy and say, come on, get to bed. We've got to get up, all of us, and go to work. But it turned out that this chair that I was finding pulled out all the time was the same chair that he sat in when they would be in the dining room playing that crazy game. Mm-hmm. And that chair continued to do that for the rest of the time that we lived in that house, and that was for at least another 7 years that continued.
Now, didn't it make a transition to your bedroom at one point?
Yes. I came home from work one day, and as I headed off toward our master bedroom, I just stopped dead in my tracks because there was a chair that was at a desk inside our master bedroom. That chair had been placed directly in the doorway to get into the bedroom. And I actually thought to myself, someone must be in the house. Yeah. I was pretty freaked out by that one, but there was no one else there. That was a one-time event. But another time when I came home, I saw in the hallway there was a bookcase that was built into the hallway there. And from the very last shelf in that bookshelf there, it was at floor carpet level. you could see where this book had come out of the carpet level shelf. And this book apparently had flown across to the other side of the hallway. It was up against the other side. And, of course, I stopped and I thought, okay, what is happening here? But I picked up the book, and the book was an old leftover book from an encyclopedia set, and it was Volume D, which, of course, my brother's name was Don.
Mm-hmm.
And another time, my husband and I were in our little TV room area. There was a very tall bookshelf in there, bookcase. And the bookcases we had in there the shelving was very deep. And at the back of the topmost shelf were some videos, like from vacations and things of that nature. But we're in there watching TV, and all of a sudden, this video from the very topmost shelf comes flying out halfway across the room and falls right at our feet. And this was not just a case of it was at the edge of the shelf and fell. No, this thing flew across the room.
Yeah.
And my husband and I were so startled. We looked at each other like, what just happened here? But the funny thing about that is when my brother lived with us that summer, we had a video camera, and my husband and my brother would get in there and video these crazy things in that room. They would set up the video camera in there. And so yet again, it seems that it was another way my brother was communicating, not just with me, but,
right.
With my husband right there.
Well, a part of this, though, as this has continued, and you're saying you're getting back into that, I think the other thing is that you retired from having to do things that really were a little bit more tedious in terms of mental paying attention, to being able to kind of step back and allow your intuition to expand. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
And for other people who are experiencing something like that, the loss, we're glossing over that. Just let me be honest, that I'm glossing over that because there's so much to talk about in terms of all of everything else that went by. But that's what is really, I think, the driving point of this, is that if you are grieving from the loss of somebody significant, then this is a way through. And that's what your story helps, I think, show, that it's a way through and you don't have to be stuck in the grief, because you were stuck for quite a while.
Yes, I was, because my brother and I were very close. We were 4 years apart and essentially grew up together. And so I think this was his way, as you say, of trying to help me through that grief and see that, hey, I'm still here. I'm still alive. I'm still around you. I'm checking in with you from time to time. I have had some people ask me if they think my brother is an earthbound ghost, and I said no. Not at all. Not from what I've seen.
There's a difference.
Yes.
I think. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, there's so many other ways too that he continues to reach out to me. He's always used pictures, photographs of, from our family. I have a lot of photographs around, and I used to come home and I would find this one picture of him with his best friend, and that would always, so many times, that picture was turned down, and I would try to make that picture fall in so many ways, and I never could.
Mm-hmm.
And so he still uses pictures in that way. And surprisingly enough, I've never been around when that's actually happened, like when a picture has turned down. It's always been a case of I've come into the room and I've seen it.
Mm-hmm.
But surprisingly enough, very recently, in my office I'm in here right now, for the first time, I've had 2 incidents where I was sitting here at my desk working at the computer very quietly, and I've had pictures fall down or fly out of the bookcase while I'm in here.
Uh-huh. Yes. Okay. That's there's a reason. Okay, hang on. Paula Lenz, my guest. The book, Driving into Infinity, Living with My Brother's Spirit. We're going to get back into the mist. There's something that is important with that. It's Wendy's Coffee House, KCMO Talk Radio. Wendy's Coffee House, KCMO Talk Radio. Thank you for listening. I'm talking with my guest, Paula Lenz, who has had a shared death experience with her brother. And this is one of those things where you can be present. She happened to be driving in a truck at the time that it happened, and her body kept doing exactly what it needed to do while her spirit went out for a little tour and almost tried to stay. And her brother said, no, kiddo. You're still there. And this is why you're here. There's one of the things that you discovered after doing so much reading and exploring and trying to figure out how to reconcile these experiences you had with your brother. Then there's the mist, meld into spirit. I thought that was a really crucial element. And I have another question after we talk about that before we wrap up. But the mist, explain that, because I think that's helpful.
Yes, I call it meld into spirit technique, because I've discovered that when I'm out walking around or really anywhere, you can do this connection with spirit and make this more a natural part of your life, connecting with this higher consciousness. And in fact, I even talk about what I call conscientious consciousness, whereby you take the time to remember to connect to this higher consciousness, which consciousness is defined as a quality or state of being aware, especially of something within oneself or knowledge of one's own existence. And that existence is all about our connection with spirit, this energy that we're part of at all times, but we do need to remember to consciously connect with that energy. And so I'm actually developing a workshop on this, and I had a little video clip developed to help people imagine and visualize how to get to this state. But it's really all about wherever you are, just imagine yourself, the edges of who you are just kind of blurring and melding, becoming part of everything that you can see. And all of those elements that you're looking at, they all blur together and become almost like particles of light. And you continue to imagine that out as you're looking at the earth and on out into the universe with it, everything just blurring, becoming these particles of light in your mind's eye. And at that point, then you are actually entering, connecting with that consciousness of the universe, that energy of love, and you're more able to realize that that is who you really are. And again, the point of this is to be able to do this wherever you are. Now, I don't recommend you do this while you're trying to concentrate driving or operate machinery, but the idea is that the more we can do this in a more natural way, the more we are going to be able to incorporate on a daily basis that level of consciousness, that connection with the oneness of this energy of love and the creation and manifestation. And so as we work in life and do what we do and desire to bring good things into our lives, by having that more natural connection, when you're connecting with that energy and those desires are there, then it's easier to manifest good things in your life through this process.
Okay, Paula, let me tell you, with all of this, we're gonna have to wrap up. But I thought it was so cool when you said you knew everything at that moment when you had that out of body, that transcendent experience, and you remembered everything. Can you do a little book on that one? Like Cliff Notes?
I don't think so. It was a case of I knew that was true, but it's not like I've got a whole thousands of books inside my head, like knowing everything.
Oh, so yeah. A lot of times they wipe it. It's like, you know it, because I've had an experience where it felt so good to know my plan, my game, what I was doing, and it was all important, and it really made sense as opposed to now. It's kind of blurry. But I was like thrilled. I was going to come back, and I had this little like an outline, an angel book, I called it. But as soon as I went through this little gray cloud, this ether, this separation to come back here, I had to let it go. I'm like, wait,
Yes.
no, that's where all the answers are. I was thrilled, and I was like, no.
Well, and talking about that very aspect, of all the things that I remembered, there was one aspect of when I was listening to my brother and my experience. I knew that there was something he told me, but I was not allowed to remember that. And I have come to finally find out that what he told me was, he told me I was going to write this book, but he didn't want me to know that had been said, because he said I wouldn't have believed him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, in all good time, sometimes some of those things we are allowed to remember.
Well, and sometimes you have, after being a teacher for so many years, you are trained, you have earned your PhD to go out and talk about this in a way that makes sense. It's accessible. You're trained to be a presenter. And that, I think, is what a lot of this stuff is about, too. Without knowing what you were going to do, here you are with this incredible message and been there, done that, so that others who are either going through it or may know somebody else who is can say, all right, this is helpful. This is something my resource I can fall back on and look forward to. Is this going to be on the website, the video and all of those things?
Eventually, yes, I will get it out there. As I said, I'm working on all the pieces for the workshop to get that all pulled together. And but yes, it is my intention to have that as a workshop online, and to talk about that at as I do speaking at conferences and that sort of thing.
All right. Well, I think you're in a really wonderful spot right now to be able to pull this all together, and it's nice that you found out what it was that he wasn't going to tell you. He knew you too well.
Yes, indeed.
That brother and sister thing. No, you're not right. No way, no how.
Yes, it's so true.
Well, and then so in that respect, the gift that you have is knowing where this goes and knowing that next level, that next step. Just because you're not there and it wasn't the right time, I think that's what this is about, is to say you have that knowing. And even if it's just a few outlines of what that was like, that's helpful. And you've got another book. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Let's see if he moves another chair and drops some more pictures. Okay, come on, Donnie. Come on. Hey, thank you, Paula. We got to get out of here, but thank you. And the book is available on Amazon. You have a Facebook page as well, too, right?
Facebook page, yes. And it is available Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Balboa Press. Well,
for anybody who's curious, there's a whole lot we didn't get to cover, all right? And that's the beauty of this, that the learning, the knowing, the experiences are available. If you're curious and you feel compelled, you might have a story to share as well after you read about Paula's. Paula Lenz, thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll put some links on my website, thewendyscoffeehouse.com, the blog site, and let you know about that, too. My spirit guide came to me recently and showed me the form of an ant. I said, well, why are you an ant? He said, because the guy with the beard's been overdone. Okay, so they reach us any way they possibly can, and mine usually have a decent sense of humor. So on that happy note, stay curious, think positive. There's a whole lot going on here that we don't see, but if we open our heart, we can feel it. Till next time, see ya.
Major phone carriers make you sign contracts with rigid data plans to trap you into a kind of forced phonogamy. Sounds pretty insecure if you ask me. At Consumer Cellular, we believe in a more consensual and healthy form of phonogamy. free of contracts and more flexible to your data needs. This way, you stick around not because we force you to with contracts and fees, but because you love our phone plans. Like ardently love our phone plans. Phonogamously. Consumer Cellular. When Freedom calls, we're here to answer. Call us at 1-888-FREEDOM.
When things feel a bit chaotic, Instacart helps deliver milk and sausage. Add a little life to your cart. Get stuff from literally all your stores, from baby wipes to albacore. Add a little life to your cart. Instacart helps get your groceries. Your first 3 deliveries are free.
Download Instacart. Add life to cart. Terms apply.